let's talk about the air regulations for the new spark ignition engines, kind of like what we're sitting in front of right now. Okay. First of all, what do we mean by new?
A spark ignition engine is considered new if it was ordered after June the 12th, 2006, or manufactured on or after one of the following dates. For engines that are greater than or equal to 500 horsepower, the new rules apply to engines manufactured after July 1st, 2007. However, there are exceptions. Lean burn engines greater than or equal to 500 horsepower, but less than 1,350 horsepower, are considered new if they were manufactured after January 1st, 2008. Also, engines less than 500 horsepower manufactured after July 1st, 2008 are considered to be new. Last, emergency engines greater than 25 horsepower are considered to be new if they were manufactured after January 1st, 2009.
And the requirements also apply if the engine has been modified or reconstructed after June 12th, 2006?
Correct. An engine is considered modified if a physical change is made that causes an increase to a regulated pollutant. An engine is considered reconstructed if the capital cost of the new components is greater than 50% of the cost of an entirely new engine.
Okay. Are there any other terms we need to know?
There are. Rich burn and lean burn are the terms we need to understand. A rich burn engine means any four-stroke spark ignited engine where the manufacturer's recommended operating air to fuel ratio divided by the stoichiometric air to fuel ratio at full load conditions is less than or equal to 1.1. Engines originally manufactured as rich burn engines but modified prior to June 12, 2006 with passive emission control technology for nitrous oxides, such as pre-combustion chambers, will be considered lean burn engines.
What about existing engines where there are no manufacturer recommendations for the air-to-fuel ratio?
These will be considered rich burn engines if the excess oxygen content of the exhaust at full load conditions is less than or equal to 2%. A lean burn engine is any two-stroke or four-stroke engine that does not meet the definition of a rich burn engine. If an engine owner is not familiar with these terms, he should be able to contact the manufacturer or his dealer to find out whether or not his engine is a rich burn or a lean burn engine.
So what are the emission standards for a new spark ignition engine?
The emission standards are based on the horsepower of the engine and the type of fuel that it uses. Engines less than or equal to 25 horsepower generally must meet the nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrocarbon emission standards found in Part 90 or Part 1054 of Title 40 in the Code of Federal Regulations.
And this is based on the engine's model year and displacement?
Correct. It applies to both emergency and non-emergency engines and requires manufacturers to certify that the engines meet the standards.
Okay, and earlier you mentioned fuel type.
Correct.
Okay, what are the different fuel types we're talking about here?
Non-emergency gasoline and rich burn liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG engines, as well as non-emergency natural gas and lean burn LPG engines that are greater than 25 horsepower and less than 100 horsepower generally must meet the nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrocarbon emission standards found in Part 1048 of Title 40 in the Code of Federal Regulations. Emergency and non-emergency engines greater than or equal to 100 horsepower that are not gasoline and not rich burn LPG engines generally must meet the nitrogen oxide and carbon monoxide and hydrocarbon emission standards found in Table 1 of Subpart 4J. Emergency engines of 25 to 100 horsepower that are not gasoline or Richburn LPG engines must also meet the standards in Table 1 of Subpart 4J.
What are the compliance requirements for certified engines?
Manufacturers are required to certify all engines that are less than or equal to 25 horsepower and all gasoline and Richburn LPG engines that are greater than 25 horsepower.
Is there an advantage to purchasing a manufacturer-certified spark ignition engine?
Yes, there are. There are fewer compliance requirements. Yeah, really. And you have to operate and maintain the engine according to the configuration required by the manufacturer. But yes.
And if they don't?
If they don't, then they first must keep a maintenance plan and records, and then operate the engine consistent with good air pollution control practices. Also, for engines greater than or equal to 100 horsepower and less than or equal to 500 horsepower, an initial performance test will need to be conducted when the engine is put into service. Additionally, for engines greater than 500 horsepower, the owner will need to conduct an initial performance test and a subsequent test every 8,760 hours of operation or every 3 years, whichever comes first.
Okay, and for those who have a non-certified engine, what are their requirements?
For non-certified engines, owners must first develop and continue a maintenance plan and then conduct performance testing. The performance test requirements vary. For engines greater than 25 horsepower but less than or equal to 500 horsepower, only an initial test is required. For engines greater than 500 horsepower, an initial test and a subsequent test is required every 8,760 hours of operation or every 3 years, whichever comes first. The tests must be conducted within 10% of peak or highest achievable load.
We know we have additional compliance requirements for monitoring, record keeping, reporting for certain types of engines. Can you cover those?
Certainly. The owner must use, for emergency engines, a non-resettable hour meter and then keep records of operations. Other required records to be kept include, first, all notifications that the regulation requires the owner to submit and all documentation supporting each notification. Second, all maintenance conducted on the engine. And third, if the engine is a certified engine, documentation from the manufacturer that the engine is certified to meet the emission standards and information as required in Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations in Parts 90, 1048, 1054, and 1060, whichever section applies.
So what if the engine is not certified?
If the engine is not a certified engine, or is a certified engine operating in a non-certified manner and subject to the specified compliance requirements, the owner must keep documentation that the engine meets the emission standards. Initial notification must be given for a non-certified engine greater than 500 horsepower and must be submitted no later than 30 days after the date the engine is ordered. For engines that require performance testing, results should be reported within 60 days of conducting the performance test. If the engine is an emergency engine, it is operated or is contractually obligated to be available more than 15 hours per year and up to 100 hours per year for either emergency demand response or voltage and frequency deviation, or is operated for up to 50 hours per year to ensure local power reliability, then owners are required to submit a report to EPA.
Okay, and then starting in 2015, reports must be submitted electronically by March 31st of the following year. What needs to be included in these reports?
Reports should contain the facility name and address, the engine rating, its model year, and the latitude and longitude of its operation. Also needed is the date, start time, and end time of operations for emergency demand response, for voltage and frequency deviations, or local reliability. If applicable, Reports require the number of hours the engine is contractually obligated for emergency demand response or voltage frequency deviation. The name of the entity that dispatched the engine for local reliability and the situation that necessitated the dispatch. Additionally, deviations from fuel requirements must be reported.
And these reports are submitted electronically through the Compliance and Emissions Data Reporting Interface. This tool can be accessed through EPA's CDX. So now we know what we need to do to comply. When is compliance due?
The owner must comply with the requirements once the engine is operational. It is important that the owner contact their EPA regional office as soon as possible if they are not already in compliance with the regulation.
And they can locate the appropriate contact person at EPA website listed on the screen.
That's correct.
So John, thanks for covering the air quality regulations for the new spark ignition engines.
You're welcome.
And thank you for viewing this information.